Today live March 3, 2021. World News Headlines. Cuomo apologizes but will not resign in wake of sexual harassment allegations. U.S. House set to pass sweeping election bill, Senate prospects unclear. Millions of U.S. households would not get COVID-19 payments under new Biden plan. Investigators probe black box in car crashed by golfer Tiger Woods. Nearly 40 killed in violent day of protests against Myanmar coup, UN envoy says. Navalny emerges in jail in Russia's Vladimir region, meets lawyers. ICC prosecutor to probe war crimes in Palestinian Territories, angering Israel. EU vows legal response as UK moves unilaterally on Northern Ireland. Iran looms over Senate hearing for Biden nominee for senior U.S. state post. Kremlin, Musk invitation to Putin to chat on Clubhouse some kind of misunderstanding. Do Biden's tough new sanctions give Putin Nord Stream 2? Microsoft says Chinese hacking group targeting security flaws in business email app. Cuomo apologizes but will not resign in wake of sexual harassment allegations. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo on Wednesday said he would not resign in the wake of a series of sexual misconduct accusations leveled against him by young women, but offered a fresh apology and vowed to fully cooperate with a review by the state's attorney general. "I am not going to resign," Cuomo told a news conference after he offered an emotional apology for what he said was behavior that made people feel uncomfortable. "I feel awful about it and frankly I am embarrassed by it," said the Democratic governor, who has also contended with allegations in recent weeks that his administration sought to downplay the number of elderly nursing home residents killed by COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. Cuomo said his behavior toward the women who have accused him of misconduct was unintentional and maintained that he never touched anyone inappropriately. Even so, he acknowledged that it is custom for him to kiss and hug people when greeting them. "I understand that sensitivities have changed and behavior has changed, and I get it, and I'm going to learn from it," he said. 3 women, including 2 former aides, have come forward recently to say that Cuomo had sexually harassed them or made inappropriate remarks. Lindsay Boylan, who first came forward in December, said the unwanted advances included an unsolicited kiss on the lips in Cuomo's New York City office, which Cuomo denied. Boylan, a candidate for Manhattan Borough President, dismissed the governor's apology in a Twitter message on Wednesday. "How can New Yorkers trust you at Nigoff Cuomo to lead our state if you don't know when you've been inappropriate with your own staff?" she wrote. Investigation to begin. The second woman to detail her experience is Charlotte Bennett, a former executive assistant and health policy advisor who told the New York Times in February that Cuomo peppered her with questions about her romantic life last year and what she viewed as an effort to have sex with her. A third woman has also come forward, telling the New York Times the governor made unwanted advances and physical contact after meeting her at a wedding in 2019. In response to Bennett, Cuomo released a statement on Sunday saying he sometimes playfully teased colleagues and was sorry if he made anyone uncomfortable, and his office granted the referral required by state law for New York Attorney General Letitia James to investigate the complaints. Deborah Katz, the attorney who represented Christine Blasey Ford when she alleged that Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her, is now representing Bennett. In a statement on Wednesday, Katz said Cuomo's apology was full of falsehoods. Reuters could not immediately reach representatives for the other 2 women. "I apologized several days ago. I apologize today, I will apologize tomorrow, I will apologize the day after," Cuomo said on Wednesday as he pleaded with the public to get the facts before forming an opinion. The complaints about sexual misconduct emerged after questions mounted over Cuomo's handling of the coronavirus pandemic last year as it tore through nursing homes. New York State politicians, many of them fellow Democrats, have said that Cuomo tried to silence his critics and routinely governed through intimidation. In January, James' office issued a report that said the state health department significantly undercounted the death toll in nursing homes and implemented policies that may have contributed to the death toll. U.S. House set to pass sweeping election bill, Senate prospects unclear. Washington, the Democratic-controlled U.S. House of Representatives on Wednesday is expected to pass its flagship election reform bill, which would update voting procedures and require states to turn over the task of redrawing congressional districts to independent commissions. The legislation, whose number H.R. 1 indicates the importance Democrats attach to it, is designed to restore the voices of Americans who felt left out and locked out for too long, Representative John Sarbanes, the original sponsor of the legislation, said in remarks outside the U.S. Capitol. The bill is one of many the House Democrats are voting on early in the Congress on a number of priorities, including lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender rights, policing and the environment. President Joe Biden, a Democrat, has said he would sign the bill into law if it cleared both the House and the Senate. But the bills face long odds in the Senate, where all 48 Democrats and the 2 independents who caucus with them would need to be joined by 10 Republican senators to overcome a filibuster. Already, some Democrats have trained fire on the filibuster and called for its elimination. Representative Steny Hoyer, the number 2 Democrat, called the filibuster undemocratic at a news conference on Tuesday, and James Clyburn, the number 3 Democrat, described how the filibuster had been used to deny rights to black citizens. "We're going to do everything in our power. I think Chuck Schumer's going to do everything in his power to make sure that the agenda that we are working on and promise the people will in fact be the agenda that we put forward and hopefully pass," said Hoyer. Such a move to destroy the filibuster would face severe opposition. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin has repeatedly said he would never vote to get rid of the filibuster, while Biden has said he opposes overturning it. Some Democrats have suggested a compromise of a carve-out could be possible. Asked about the possibility of a carve-out for voting rights issues, Senator Raphael Warnock, who was narrowly elected in Georgia, a state that has since introduced a raft of changes to election procedures that critics say target black voters, told a reporter on Tuesday, "I think that the issues are urgent enough to leave all options on the table." Democrats have argued the legislation is necessary to lower barriers to voting and to make the U.S. political system more democratic and responsive to voters. But Republicans contend the bill would take powers away from the states and fail to do enough to combat fraud, and the influential right-wing Heritage Foundation think tank has urged lawmakers to vote against it. The bill has particular importance this year because the U.S. Census Bureau is set to turn over population data that states use to redraw congressional district maps ahead of the 2022 elections, where every House lawmaker's seat is up for grabs. States use different criteria and procedures for drawing the maps. In 33 states, state legislatures control at least part of the process of drawing those maps, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. The parties in control of state legislatures have often wielded the power to draw the maps in a way that benefits the party in power. Some states have also used this process to target black voters. It also comes as state lawmakers in 43 states have introduced legislation to place more limits on voting, according to the Brennan Center for Justice. Several states, including Georgia, where Warnock and Democrat John Ossoff were elected in a political upset in January, have since introduced changes to their election procedures that activists say make it more difficult for people to vote. Millions of U.S. households would not get COVID-19 payments under new Biden plan. Washington: millions of U.S. households who received coronavirus relief payments under President Donald Trump would not get aid under a modified version of President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion aid package announced on Wednesday, analysts said. Under a compromise with centrist Democrats in the Senate, those payments would only go to individuals who earned less than $80,000 or couples who earned less than $160,000. The income cutoff had been $100,000 and $200,000, respectively, under a version of the bill passed by the Democratic-led House of Representatives on Saturday. That means nearly 9 million fewer households would get direct payments this time around, said Kyle Palmer-Lew, a tax analyst with the conservative American Enterprise Institute. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy calculated that those payments now would help 11.8 million fewer adults and 4.6 million fewer children than the more generous version that passed the House. But 200 million adults and 80 million children would still see benefits, the left-leaning think tank estimated. For the bottom 60% of Americans, the folks who really need help, there would be basically no difference at all, ATEP analyst Steve Wovoff said. The lower caps would reduce the cost of the massive package by between $13 billion and $20 billion, they said, roughly 1% of the total. Some 162 million households received payments under the first round of payments included in the CARES Act of 2020, according to the Internal Revenue Service. The Democratic-controlled Senate expects to open debate on the package as early as Wednesday, with a final vote for passage seen later in the week. At a total cost of more than $400 billion, the direct aid is one of the largest elements in a sweeping aid package that also pays for vaccines and medical supplies to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, and earmarks hundreds of billions of dollars to help revive the world's largest economy. The pandemic has killed more than 515,000 Americans to date and thrown millions out of work. The bill would provide payments of up to $1,400 per person, including children, a significant jump from the $1,200 per person payments approved under the CARES Act and the $600 per person payments Congress approved in December. As in those earlier aid packages, the payments would be reduced for individuals earning more than $75,000 and couples earning more than $150,000. The compromise announced on Wednesday means the payments are phased out more dramatically. Investigators probe black box in car crashed by golfer Tiger Woods. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department is examining data from the black box recorder of the car driven by Tiger Woods last week when the champion golfer lost control of the vehicle and seriously injured his leg and ankle in a one-car crash. Investigators would not say what they were looking for, but in the days after the crash have been trying to determine what caused Woods, 45, to lose control of the gray Genesis sport utility vehicle. Traffic collision investigators are continuing the investigation into the cause of the collision involving Mr. Woods, Deputy Trina Schrader said in a statement emailed to Reuters on Wednesday. On March 1, 2021, they executed a search warrant to retrieve data from the vehicle's black box. At this time, there is no additional information regarding the recovered data. Woods was negotiating a curved, downhill stretch of highway that authorities have said was notoriously dangerous when the luxury SUV veered across the opposite lanes, collided with a road sign and rolled several times. Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva said last week that he did not anticipate filing any criminal charges in connection with the accident. Sheriff's deputies responding to the wreck found no indication that Woods had been under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and said he was lucid following the accident. "This remains an accident, and an accident is not a crime," Villanueva said at a news briefing. "They do happen, unfortunately." Woods, celebrated as one of golf's all-time greats, had to be pried from the crumpled SUV through the shattered windshield. Woods is the only modern professional to win all 4 major golf titles in succession, taking the U.S. Open, British Open and PGA Championship in 2000 and the Masters title in 2001, a feat that became known as the Tiger Slam. His 15 major titles stand second only to the record 18 won by Jack Nicklaus. But he has suffered years of injuries and undergone multiple surgeries on his back and knees, limiting his ability to compete. Nearly 40 killed in violent day of protests against Myanmar coup, UN envoy says. 38 people were killed in Myanmar as the military quelled protests in several towns and cities on Wednesday, the United Nations said, the most violent day since demonstrations against last month's military coup first broke out. Police and soldiers opened fire with live rounds with little warning, witnesses said. The bloodshed occurred one day after neighboring countries had called for restraint in the aftermath of the military's overthrow of the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. "It's horrific, it's a massacre. No words can describe the situation and our feelings," youth activist Thinzer Shunlei told Reuters via a messaging app. The dead included 4 children, an aid agency said. Hundreds of protesters were arrested, local media reported. Today it was the bloodiest day since the coup happened on the 1st of February. We had today, only today, 38 people died. We have now more than over 50 people died since the coup started. Many are wounded, United Nations Special Envoy on Myanmar, Christine Schroner-Bergener, said in New York. A spokesman for the ruling military council did not answer telephone calls seeking comment. Schroner-Bergener said that in conversations with Myanmar's deputy military chief Su Win, she had warned him that the military was likely to face strong measures from some countries and isolation in retaliation for the coup. The answer was, "We are used to sanctions, and we survived," she told reporters in New York. "When I also warned they will go into isolation, the answer was, we have to learn to walk with only few friends." The UN Security Council is due to discuss the situation on Friday in a closed meeting, diplomats said. Sustained shooting. Kobo Chi, Joint Secretary of Myanmar's Assistance Association for Political Prisoners' Rights Group, had said earlier the military killed at least 18. But the toll rose by the end of the day. In the main city Yangon, witnesses said at least 8 people were killed, 7 of them when security forces opened sustained fire in a neighborhood in the north of the city in the early evening. "I heard so much continuous firing. I lay down on the ground, they shot a lot," protester Kong Pai-Son Tun, 23, told Reuters. In Washington, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said the United States was appalled by the increase in violence. The administration of President Joe Biden was evaluating appropriate measures to respond and any actions would be targeted at Myanmar's military, he added. The United States has conveyed to China that it is looking for Beijing to play a constructive role in Myanmar, the spokesman said. The European Union said the shootings of unarmed civilians and medical workers were clear breaches of international law. It also said the military was stepping up repression of the media, with a growing number of journalists arrested and charged. In the central town of Monawa, 6 people were killed, the Monawa Gazette reported. Others were killed in the second biggest city Mandalay, the northern town of Abakant and the central town of Yingyan. Save the Children said in a statement 4 children were among the dead, including a 14-year-old boy who Radio Free Asia reported was shot dead by a soldier on a passing convoy of military trucks. The soldiers loaded his body onto a truck and left the scene, according to the report. We shall overcome. Security forces breaking up protests in Yangon detained about 300 protesters, the Myanmar Now news agency reported. Video posted on social media showed lines of young men, hands on heads, filing into army trucks as police and soldiers stood guard. Reuters was unable to verify the footage. Images of a 19-year-old woman, one of two shot dead in Mandalay, showed her wearing a t-shirt that read "Everything will be okay." Police in Yangon ordered 3 medics out of an ambulance, shut up the windscreen and then kicked and beat the workers with gun butts and batons. Video broadcast by US-funded Radio Free Asia showed. Reuters was unable to verify the video independently. Democracy activist Esther Z. Na told Reuters that the sacrifices of those who died would not be in vain. We shall overcome this and win, she said. On Tuesday, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, failed to make a breakthrough in a virtual foreign ministers' meeting on Myanmar. While united in a call for restraint, only 4 members, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines and Singapore, called for the release of Suu Kyi and other detainees. We expressed ASEAN's readiness to assist Myanmar in a positive, peaceful and constructive manner, the ASEAN chair Brunei said in a statement. Myanmar state media said the military-appointed foreign minister, Wannamong Win, attended and apprised the meeting of voting irregularities in the November election. The military justified the coup by saying its complaints of voter fraud in the November 8 vote were ignored. Suu Kyi's party won by a landslide, earning a second term. The Election Commission said the vote was fair. Junta leader Senior General Min Aung Hlaing has pledged to hold new elections but given no time frame. UN envoy Schroeder Bergener said his deputy Suu Win told her that after a year they want to have another election. Suu Kyi, 75, has been held incommunicado since the coup but appeared at a court hearing via video conferencing this week and looked in good health, a lawyer said. Navalny emerges in jail in Russia's Vladimir region, meets lawyers. Moscow Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny is sharing a quarantine cell in central Russia, allies said on Wednesday, revealing his location for the first time since he was moved from jail in Moscow last week to serve a 2.5-year sentence in a penal colony. The whereabouts of Navalny, 44, had been a mystery since he left jail in Moscow. His lawyer Vadim Kobsev told Reuters he had met Navalny at the Kolchugino jail in the Vladimir region northeast of Moscow. Navalny was feeling good despite hardship, Kobsev said. TASS news agency, citing a law enforcement source, said Navalny was being held there for quarantine before his further transportation to the IK2 penal colony, also in the Vladimir region. The quarantine could last 15 days, it said. On his Twitter feed, Kobsev said Navalny was sharing the cell with 2 others, but was kept isolated from the outside world with no letters. There is nothing in the cell except a TV set. There is no refrigerator or even a tea kettle. Activists have described conditions in the penal colony as particularly severe. Navalny, who recuperated in Germany from what German authorities say was poisoning with a banned nerve agent, was arrested on his return in January and sentenced for parole violations that he says were trumped up. His illness and imprisonment have sparked a diplomatic conflict between Russia and the West. ICC prosecutor to probe war crimes in Palestinian territories, angering Israel. The Hague, the International Criminal Court prosecutor said on Wednesday her office will formally investigate war crimes in the Palestinian territories, a move welcomed by the Palestinian Authority and denounced by Israel. The decision follows a ruling by the court on February 5 that it has jurisdiction in the case, prompting swift rejections by Washington and Jerusalem. The decision to open an investigation followed a painstaking preliminary examination undertaken by my office that lasted close to 5 years, prosecutor Fatou Bensouda said in a statement. Promising a principled, nonpartisan approach, she said, in the end, our central concern must be for the victims of crimes, both Palestinian and Israeli, arising from the long cycle of violence and insecurity that has caused deep suffering and despair on all sides. Bensouda, who will be replaced by British prosecutor Karim Khan on June 16, said in December 2019 that war crimes had been or were being committed in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. She named both the Israel Defense Forces and armed Palestinian groups such as Hamas as possible perpetrators. The next step will be to determine whether Israeli or Palestinian authorities have investigations themselves and to assess those efforts. Long-awaited step. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the court's decision was undiluted anti-Semitism and the height of hypocrisy. He accused the court of turning a blind eye to Iran, Syria and other countries that he said were committing real war crimes. Without any jurisdiction, it decided that our brave soldiers, who take every precaution to avoid civilian casualties against the worst terrorists in the world who deliberately target civilians, it's our soldiers who are war criminals, Netanyahu said in a statement. Israeli Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi said the decision was morally bankrupt and legally flawed, while Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Gilad Erdan, vowed to continue working together with the American administration against this shameful decision. The U.S. State Department said Washington firmly opposes and is disappointed by the announcement, adding that the United States has serious concerns over the ICC's attempts to exercise jurisdiction over Israel. We will continue to uphold our strong commitment to Israel and its security, including by opposing actions that seek to target Israel unfairly. The ICC has no jurisdiction over this matter, State Department spokesman Ned Price told reporters. The prosecutor's office was targeted by sanctions under then U.S. President Donald Trump. Washington opposes the ICC investigation in Afghanistan, which is also looking at the role of U.S. forces, and the Palestinian Territories inquiry. The Palestinian Authority's foreign ministry welcomed the prosecutor's investigation as a long-awaited step that serves Palestine's tireless pursuit of justice and accountability, which are indispensable pillars of the peace the Palestinian people seek and deserve. It urged all states to refrain from politicizing these independent proceedings. George Giacomin, a Palestinian political analyst and professor at Birzeit University in the occupied West Bank, said the ICC decision showed the Palestinian leadership's strategy of appealing to global institutions had had some success. While cautioning that the probe could take years, Giacomin said, "At best, one can say that in the future, the Israelis will be more careful with hitting Palestinian civilians. Perhaps the ICC will prove to be a deterrent." The Islamist militant group Hamas, which controls Gaza and is regarded as a terrorist organization by Israel, the United States and the European Union, defended its own actions in the conflict. "We welcome the ICC decision to investigate Israeli occupation war crimes against our people. It is a step forward on the path of achieving justice," said Hazem Ghassaim, a Hamas spokesman in Gaza. Rights groups said the decision offered victims hope of justice. Balkis Jarrah, Associate International Justice Director at Human Rights Watch, said ICC member countries should be ready to protect the court's work from any political pressure. The ICC is a court of last resort established to prosecute war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide when a country is unable or unwilling to do so. The pro-Israel lobbying group AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, urged President Joe Biden to maintain the sanctions on ICC officials pursuing what it called illegitimate, politically motivated investigations into the U.S. and Israel. EU vows legal response as UK moves unilaterally on Northern Ireland. Brussels, London. The European Union promised legal action on Wednesday after the British government unilaterally extended a grace period for checks on food imports to Northern Ireland, a move Brussels said violated terms of Britain's divorce deal. Since it left the EU last year, Britain's relations with the bloc have soured, with both sides accusing the other of acting in bad faith in relation to part of their trade agreement that covers goods movements to Northern Ireland. The British government extended a grace period for some checks on agricultural and food products imported by retailers to Northern Ireland until October 1 in a move it said was necessary to ensure the free flow of goods to the British region. In a statement, the European Union expressed strong concerns at a move it said amounted to a violation of the substantive provisions of the Northern Ireland Protocol, the most contentious part of Britain's divorce deal with the EU. This is the second time that the UK government is set to breach international law, the statement said. Britain last year moved to include clauses in draft domestic legislation that breached the Brexit withdrawal agreement but later withdrew them. European Commission Vice President Maros Šefčovič held a call with David Frost, the British minister responsible for ties with the EU, on Wednesday evening to express his concern. Frost told him the extension was temporary and largely continued measures already in place to provide more time for businesses such as supermarkets and parcel operators to adapt, according to a British government spokeswoman. He underlined that these were needed for operational reasons and were the minimum necessary steps to allow time for constructive discussions in the Joint Committee to continue, she said, adding that Frost said urgent progress was needed and that Britain was acting in good faith to meet its obligations. The European Commission said it would respond in accordance with the legal means established by the Withdrawal Agreement and the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. The fate of Northern Ireland was the most bitterly contested issue during Britain's Brexit negotiations, with London ultimately agreeing to leave the British-ruled province aligned to the EU's single market for goods, requiring checks on some items arriving there from elsewhere in the United Kingdom. That has already caused difficulty for businesses who say they have had trouble bringing in supplies, and more checks were meant to come into force when a grace period ends on March 31. Prime Minister Boris Johnson reiterated a vow on Wednesday to leave nothing off the table to improve post-Brexit trade with Northern Ireland. Shortly afterwards, his Northern Ireland Minister, Brandon Lewis, announced the extension of the grace period for supermarkets and their suppliers as part of the operational plan the UK committed to at the UK-EU Joint Committee on 24 February. The current scheme for temporary agri-food movements to Northern Ireland (SAMNI) will continue until 1 October, Lewis said in a written statement. Ireland's Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said he had already spoken to Frost to express his regret at the move. A unilateral announcement is deeply unhelpful to building the relationship of trust and partnership that is central to the implementation of the protocol, Coveney said. Some in Northern Ireland and several leading Brexit supporters want Johnson to scrap the protocol. Johnson said Northern Ireland's place in the UK's market was rock solid and guaranteed. We're making sure that we underscore that with some temporary operational easings in order to protect the market in some areas, such as food supplies, pending further discussions with the EU, Johnson told Parliament. We leave nothing off the table in order to ensure that we get this right. Iran looms over Senate hearing for Biden nominee for senior U.S. state post. Washington, U.S. Senators peppered President Joe Biden's nominee to be the number 2 official at the State Department with questions about Iran on Wednesday, a sign she could face difficulty winning support from Republicans even as she warned against nostalgia for the Iran nuclear deal she helped broker. Wendy Sherman, who helped negotiate the international accord in 2015, promised a new approach to Iran at her Senate Foreign Relations Committee confirmation hearing. The 2015 deal, aimed at preventing Tehran from acquiring nuclear weapons, was fiercely opposed by Republicans and some Democrats, including Senator Bob Menendez, who is now the committee's chairman. Former Republican President Donald Trump withdrew from the pact in 2018. Sherman said she did not expect the Democratic Biden administration to duplicate the approach to Iran of former President Barack Obama, for whom Biden was vice president. Biden's approach must be decided on the merits of where we are today, not nostalgia for what might have been, she said. The world had changed since 2016, when the deal was implemented, Sherman said. The facts on the ground have changed, the geopolitics of the region have changed, and the way forward must similarly change, she said. Sherman said she did not know what the administration's ultimate Iran policy would be, but stressed that Biden was determined not to let Iran obtain a nuclear weapon. Iran is a long way from compliance with the nuclear agreement, as we well know, she said. Menendez said while he supported the Biden administration's decision to engage with Iran, any policy needed bipartisan support to succeed. Senator Jim Risch, the panel's top Republican, also called for bipartisan policy and said he opposed a return to the nuclear pact. Sherman was State Department counselor from 1997 to 2001, when she was also policy coordinator on North Korea. From 1993 to 1996 she served as Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs. Several committee Democrats said they looked forward to supporting Sherman's nomination, but it was not clear how much support she would receive from Republicans. She can be confirmed without Republican support, since Democrats control the Senate. The hearing also considered one of Biden's longtime foreign policy advisors, Brian McKeon, to be Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources. McKeon, who was praised by senators from both parties, served as counsel for the committee when then-Senator Biden was its chairman. Kremlin, Musk invitation to Putin to chat on Clubhouse some kind of misunderstanding. A spokesperson for Russian President Vladimir Putin said that billionaire Elon Musk's invitation to chat on invitation-only chats app Clubhouse was some kind of misunderstanding. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Musk never responded to a follow-up query, Bloomberg News reports. Apparently there was some kind of misunderstanding, Peskov said, according to the news outlet. Most likely this matter is exhausted. Earlier in February, Musk extended an invitation to Putin on Twitter for the two to speak on Clubhouse, saying, "At Kremlin Russia_E would you like join me for a conversation on Clubhouse?" In a follow-up tweet, Musk tweeted in Russian that it would be a great honor to speak with you, Reuters reported at the time. At the time, Peskov called the offer a very interesting proposal, but said more information was needed before Putin would respond. Peskov said at the time that Putin doesn't personally use social networks directly, according to the news service. Do Biden's tough news sanctions give Putin Nord Stream 2? Western media is greeting the Biden administration's Russian sanctions as signaling a tougher stance on Russia than under former President Donald Trump. Vladimir Putin likely thinks otherwise. It looks as if the Biden administration has blinked on Putin's key foreign policy objective, the completion and operation of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, delivering Russian gas to Europe. The sanctioning of a few Kremlin officials is petty change compared to the decade-long profitable effects of Russian pipeline politics. Indeed, the new U.S. sanctions do freeze foreign assets and impose travel restrictions on a number of Russian officials associated with the attempted poisoning and sham imprisonment of Putin opponent Alexei Navalny. Yes, these are significant figures in the Kremlin hierarchy, the chief prosecutor and the head of internal security forces, but they are not the inner circle kleptocrats that Navalny's team wanted to see sanctioned. Largely overlooked in media coverage is that the Russian ruble strengthened after the announced sanctions. As the Russian news service TASS reported, notably missing from Biden's actions were new sanctions against the Nord Stream 2 undersea pipeline connecting Russia's northern gas fields directly to Germany. Thus, the current winner in the US-EU-German-Russian sanctions war appears to be Putin. He can make whole the sanctioned security officials, but he could not compensate for the shutting down of the $11 billion gas pipeline. He needs Nord Stream 2 to give him the cash cow of European energy customers. An operational Nord Stream 2 means the eventual shutdown of existing pipelines through the territory of Russia's archenemy, Ukraine, and gives Russia an important lever over its former satellites in Eastern Europe. The Trump administration played a tough cat-and-mouse game to torpedo Nord Stream 2. It used sanctions to frighten away Western firms involved in the building, ensuring and certification of the pipeline. The Trump administration succeeded in delaying completion despite Germany's full-throated defense of the project and German protests. Trump's sanctions were biting so hard that German regional authorities had to cook up a questionable local foundation through which all Nord Stream 2 related payments would flow. A common charge against President Trump is that he went it alone in terms of foreign policy and our allies. In his fight against Nord Stream 2, Trump had more than enough European allies. Virtually all of the EU, except Germany and Austria, opposed Nord Stream 2. German politics, on the other hand, favored Nord Stream 2 as a way to soften the transition to the country's green energy programs. German officials insisted this is just an ordinary commercial project, and they claimed that the U.S. opposed the pipeline only because it wants to sell Europe its own liquefied natural gas, LNG. Both Berlin and Washington refused comment on whether the two parties are negotiating a Nord Stream 2 compromise. According to some accounts, Germany secretly offered the Trump administration a dirty deal, whereby Germany would subsidize LNG terminals along the German coast. Apparently, the Trump administration turned down such a deal, but it may prove attractive to the new Biden administration. The new sanctions and the lack of attention to Nord Stream 2 as its pipe-laying fleet inches toward completion offer some important lessons. For Putin, it shows that he can carry through his most important initiatives, no matter how outrageous his behavior, such as the poisoning of Navalny. Europe still wants to find a way to do business with Russia and will avoid taking steps unacceptable to Putin. The newly imposed U.S. sanctions offer Putin his first impressions of the Biden administration. His conclusions must either be that Biden is soft or that Biden does not understand what is important to Putin. But Putin will have his answer to that question when Berlin and Washington strike a compromise that enables Nord Stream 2 to go forward, which at this juncture seems the most likely outcome, Navalny or no Navalny. Don't forget to comment below with your common sense and subscribe to your podcast. This helps bring the podcast to life and grow it. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We can't wait to continue this adventure with you. Support us on PayPal. Thank you very much and enjoy listening.